Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining class for today literature. And then in this occasion, we are from group one, would like to hold a presentations and the material is about the Anglo-Saxon period. First of all, I would like to introduce our group that consists of 3 person. Me, Dina Mutara Pahlavi, Chandra Wijaya, dan Anastasia. And now we are going to the move slide for a further explanation that would be read by Chandra. Chandra, it's your turn.
Oke, terima kasih Linda. Baik, sebelum kita membahas tentang the history of English literature in Old English period, ada baiknya kita mengetahui dulu aspek apa saja sih yang mempengaruhi perkembangan English literature tersebut. Yang pertama ada settlers Anglo-Saxons. The first settlers in England were the Anglo-Saxons, a Germanic people who migrated to Britain in the 5th and 6th centuries. They brought with them their language, Old English, which is the earliest form of the English language. The literature of the Anglo-Saxon was primarily oral, with epic poems and heroic tales passed down through generations before being written down. Beowulf, one of the most famous works of Old English literature, is an example of this tradition. It tells the story of a hero, Beowulf, and his battles against monsters and dragons. Dan yang kedua ada invaders of Vikings. In the 8th and 9th centuries, Viking invasion occurred in England. Vikings, also known as Norsemen or Northmen, came from Scandinavia. They raided and settled in various parts of England. The influence of Viking culture is evident in some Old English literature. The epic poem The Battle of Maldon, for example, recounts a historical battle between Anglo-Saxons and Vikings. The interaction between these cultures is also reflected in the linguistic and cultural elements found in Old English literature. Dan yang terakhir atau yang ketiga adalah Christianization or the influence of Christianity. Another significant aspect of Old English literature is the influence of Christianity. The conversion of the Anglo-Saxon of Christianity, which began in the 7th century, had a profound impact on their literature. Monasteries became centers of learning and scriptoria, where monks transcribed and preserved manuscripts. Religious themes and biblical stories found their way into Old English literature with works like The Dream of the Road and various religious poems reflecting the Christian worldview. Jadi itu tadi 3 aspek yang sangat penting yang berpengaruh dalam perkembangan English literature. Sekarang mari kita bahas tentang the history of Old English period dalam English literature tersebut. Jadi, Old English literature refers to poetry and prose written in Old English in early medieval England, from the 7th century to decades after the Norman conquest of 1066, a period often termed Anglo-Saxon England. The 7th century work, said Monsheim, is often considered as the oldest surviving poem in English, as it appears in an 8th century copy of Bede's text, The Ecclesiastical History of the English People. In descending order of quantity, Old English literature consists of sermons and saints' life, biblical translation, translated Latin works of the early church fathers, chronicles and narrative history works, laws, wills, and other legal works, practical works on grammar, medicine, and geography, and of course, poetry. Jadi bisa kita lihat bahwa English literature itu mempunyai ragam yang sangat banyak gitu. Jadi isinya itu tadi ada kayak terjemahan Alkitab, terus terjemahan karya-karya Latin, terus ada tentang undang-undang, ada kerja praktek tata bahasa, kedokteran, geografi. Dan itu tadi beberapa ragam dalam Old English literature. And in all, there are over 400 surviving manuscripts from the period, of which about 189 are considered major. In addition, some Old English text survives on stone structures and ornate objects. Nah, sekarang kita move ke Beowulf and long poems. The Old English poems are mostly anonymous. Jadi kebanyakan Old English poem itu rata-rata tidak diketahui siapa pembuatnya. And several of long poems are preserved in the Exeter book, such as The Wanderer, The Seafarer, and The Battle of Maldon, and of course Beowulf. And Beowulf marks the beginning of English literature and the most famous work of Old English literature. It was written in Old English, an early form of English. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle has also proven significant for historical study, preserving a chronology of early English history. Beowulf is the oldest surviving Germanic epic and the longest Old English poem. It was likely composed between 700 and 750 and more than 3,000 lines long. Nah, jadi Beowulf itu meskipun nggak ada bukti sejarahnya ya soal Beowulf ini, tetapi beberapa karakter, situs, dan peristiwa dalam puisi tersebut tuh dapat diverifikasi secara historis. Dan untuk informasi tambahan aja nih, bahwa Beowulf itu tadinya sebuah epik yang tanpa judul, ya anonimus tadi. Cuman ada kisah seorang hero dari Skandinavia, seorang pahlawan, yang kisahnya itu atau ceritanya itu hampir atau bisa dibilang sangat mirip dengan isi dari epik tersebut. Maka dari itu, epik tersebut yang tadinya anonimus dikasih judul Beowulf, yaitu nama dari hero tersebut. Dan sekarang kita pindah ke Old English prose. Nah, in the history of any literature, poetry has made its first appearance long before the first prose was written down. Most of the books were histories, non-imaginative, and more on the information of the period. Old English prose was characterized by a more straightforward and unrhymed form. English prose takes place wholly in England and largely as a result of the Christianization of England. Behind the rise of English prose, three names are chiefly remembered. They are King Alfred of Wessex, his companion and contemporary Elfric and Wulfstan. Nah, jadi English prose itu bisa kita lihat karakteristiknya itu sangat berbeda dengan Putri ya. Kalau English prose itu isinya itu lebih ke sejarah, terus tentang informasi dari periode-periode dahulu, dan isinya itu dan non-imajinatif gitu. Dan rata-rata isinya itu langsung to the point gitu, nggak seperti Putri yang banyak menggunakan figurative language dan semacamnya. Dan dalam perkembangan English prose itu ada 3 nama yang sangat berpengaruh dalam perkembangan English prose ini. Yaitu tadi ada King Alfred, Elfric, and Wulfstan. Dan mari sekarang kita cari tahu apa aja sih kontribusi mereka dalam perkembangan Old English prose. Yang pertama ada King Alfred. Alfred's contribution to the development of Anglo-Saxon prose is marked in the threefold way. First, Alfred developed the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, and he had enriched the entire chronicle with necessary historical facts. Secondly, King Alfred had contributed a lot to the development of Old English prose by his translation. And finally, Alfred also translated Saint. Thus, Alfred's literacy achievement is of immense significance, and for his unique contribution to the making of Old English prose, he is justly regarded as the father of English prose. Yang kedua, in the second one, ada Elfric. Now, his contribution to Old English prose is manifested mainly in the two ways. In the first place, he tried to develop English prose with his attempt to instruct Latin to his people. His two notable works are Colossian and Catholic homilies. Elfric also attempted to write a Latin-English dictionary. Secondly, Elfric is found to have immensely developed the style of Anglo-Saxon prose literature. Yang terakhir ada Wulfstan. Anglo-Saxon prose had its solid basis under the pioneering achievement of the great English King Alfred. It was further developed by Elfric, and finally, with the writing of Wulfstan, the circle of Old English prose and its development was completed. Wolfstein was an artist and he aided to the growth of the English prose style. Jadi itu tadi the history of Old English period. Baik ada dari English literaturnya, terus dari contoh long poems-nya tadi Beowulf dan juga dari prosanya. Dan sekarang mari kita lanjut ke the history of the Middle English period yang akan disampaikan oleh Dinda dan juga Ana.
Okay, thank you, Chandra. So that is the explanation about the Old English period. So now let's move to the history of Middle English period. Jadi untuk memudahkan di sini kita sudah bagi dari mulai historinya tokoh yang berpengaruh dalam sejarah Middle English period, lalu prosesnya dramanya seperti apa. Nah, Middle English period ini dimulai dari tahun 1066 dan sampai 1485 diperkirakan sekitar tahun tersebut. Oke. Mari kita lanjut, yang pertama kita bahas history of Middle English period. So, the Middle English or medieval period is began with the takeover of England by William as a Duke of Normandy, France, while occupying English land. William took over the entire territory and land of the community, so that people who won their land had to buy back to the William. In the Anglo-Saxon, heavy consonants were changed to softer French, which was influenced by the Anglo-Norman writing system. Jadi ketika di Old English itu kan kita pakai menggunakan Anglo-Saxon. Nah, ketika di history Middle English itu kita sudah mulai berubah ke arah French, yaitu sedikit lebih mudah dan dipengaruhi oleh Anglo-Norman writing system. Dan satu-satunya edukasi yang bisa kita dapat melalui gereja. So the church was the only source of education. Pada saat itu, William divided the use of language into 3 classes of language. Ada Latin, lalu Inggris, dan juga ada Prancis. Latin was used in churches and schools. French was used in courts and palaces. And the last, English, was used by commoners. And the police had an impact on the literature produced in the medieval period. Nah, untuk memudahkannya, itu dibagi menjadi 3 periode ya. Pertama ada Early Middle English, Central Middle English, and Late Middle English. In the Early Middle English, from about 1066 until dari Old English yang kemudian akan berunsur-unsur mempengaruhi ke Anglo-Norman system tadi. Lalu kita berpindah ke Central Middle English, yaitu ketika marked by the gradual formation of literary dialects, the use of an orthography greatly influenced by the Anglo-Norman writing system, and this period was especially marked by the rise of the London dialect in the hands of such writer as John Gower and Geoffrey Chaucer. Jadi di sini ada tokoh-tokoh yang berpengaruh seperti John Gower dan juga Geoffrey Chaucer yang sangat mempengaruhi bahasa yang digunakan ketika Middle English period. And the last is Late Middle English, which was marked by the spread of the London literary dialects and the gradual cleavage between the Scottish dialect and the other northern dialects. So, let's see, how about the dialects? Jadi dialek ini dibagi menjadi 3 grup yang besar ya. Kita bisa lihat di sini ada di gambar. Yang pertama dari Southern, itu subdivided in the Southeastern, Kentish, and Southwestern, chiefly in the counties south of the River Thames. Lalu ada Midland. Di sini Midland itu corresponding really to the Mercian dialect area of the Old English times. So in this area, from the Thames to southern South Yorkshire and northern Lancashire. So yang terakhir ada Northern di sini sampai ke sini itu adalah Scottish Lowland, Northern Berlin, Cumbria, Durham, Northern Lancashire, and most of Yorkshire. Jadi dibagi menjadi 3, seperti yang kita bisa gambar ini, mulai dari Southern, Midland, dan terakhir dari Northern. Selanjutnya kita akan membahas tentang tokoh yang sangat berpengaruh pada Middle English period atau medieval period. We know that this is Geoffrey Chaucer. So Geoffrey Chaucer was an English poet author and civil servant best known for the Canterbury Tales. He has been called the father of English literature or the father of English poetry. He was the first writer to be buried in the what has since come to be called Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey. So in 1340 until 1400, Geoffrey Culture helped make English dominant language of age. He is credited with combining the vocabularies of Anglo-Saxons, Scandinavian, French, and Latin into an instrument of precious and a poetic expression. Jadi di sini kenapa dia sangat berpengaruh? Karena dia itu sudah menggabungkan vocabulary mulai dari Anglo-Saxon yang dipakai di Old English tadi, Scandinavian, lalu yang mulai di Middle English ini ada French dan Latin yang diperkenalkan tadi. Sehingga karya yang paling terkenal dalam semuanya itu adalah The Canterbury Tales. Makanya dia disebut sebagai Father of English Literature atau Father of English Poetry. So he maintained a career in the civil service as a bureaucrat, courtier, diplomat, and member of parliament. Nah, kita lihat nih karya-karyanya apa aja sih sebenarnya sampai dia bisa menjadi terkenal. Itu tuh pertama, first major work was the Book of the Duchess and Elegy for Blanche of Lancaster, who died in 1368. And two other early works were Annelida and Arcite and the House of Faith. He wrote many of his major works in a prolific period when he held the job of custom comptroller for London. So his Parliament of Fools, The Legend of a Good Woman, and Troilus and Cresside all therefore from his time. It is believed that he started the Canterbury Tales in the 1380. Jadi ketika dia menulis karya yang paling terkenal itu Canterbury Tales itu diperkirakan sekitar tahun 1380. Nah, kita masuk ke karyanya yang paling terkenal yaitu Canterbury Tales. Culture was a great writer of the time who was well educated and had close ties with a powerful people of his era. Jadi Culture itu adalah penulis yang sangat terkenal dan juga sangat hebat, dan dia itu kenal dengan orang-orang yang berpengaruh pada zaman tersebut. Dan salah satu masterpiece yang dia tulis adalah Canterbury of Tales. Ceritanya itu tentang a history of English literature, tells the story of the various types of society that existed at the time, which is told humorously but realistically. Kalau kalian penasaran dengan ceritanya, kalian bisa cari cerita tersebut di Google ataupun di website lainnya, karena karya ini cukup terkenal. Next, kita akan melanjutkan ke Middle English Prose yang akan dibawakan oleh Dinda. So, please Dinda, take your time.
Okay, thank you, Anna, for the explanations. Now we move to the Middle English prose in historically in literature. So, English poetry and prose burst into sudden glory in late 50s, 70s. A decisive shift of taste toward a fluently artistic, self-consciously displaying its own grace and sophistication was announced in the works of Spenser and Sidney. It was accompanied by an upsurge in literary production that came to fruition in the 50s, 90s, and 1600. 2 decades of astonishing productivity by writers of every persuasion and caliber. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, Middle English prose refers to the form of English language used in the period of the late 11th century to the 15th century. This period followed the Old English period and preceded the early modern English period. The Middle English period is often considered to span from approximately 1100s to 1500s. There was a significant evolution in the English language influenced by historical events such as Norman conquest in 166 and interactions between the Norman French-speaking ruling class and Anglo-Saxon English-speaking populations. This linguistic evolution is reflected in the changes of vocabulary, grammar, and syntax. Jadi, selama periode Inggris ini, periode Inggris pertengahan ini tuh terjadi pergeseran bahasa yang mencolok gitu ya, karena dipengaruhi oleh beberapa sejarah atau budaya, ya termasuk itu penaklukan Norman pada tahun 1066. Prosa Inggris ini tuh pertengahan ini ditandai dengan perubahannya kosakata, tata bahasa, dan pengucapan dibandingkan dengan pendahulunya gitu dalam bahasa Inggris kuno. Next slide, please. Now we are going to learn about the history of Middle English drama. So what is Middle English drama? So Middle English drama refers to the theoretical performance and plays that were written and performed in England during the middle of the period, which spanned roughly from the late 11th century to the end of the 15th century. Middle English drama was an integral part of the medieval English culture and was often associated with the religious festivals and events. Next slide, please. Oke, jadi di drama Inggris ini tuh pertengahan mengacu kepada produksi teater yang berlangsung di Inggris selama periode Inggris pertengahan, yang kira-kira itu berlangsung pada abad ke-12 hingga ke abad 17. Nah, era ini juga itu menandai transisi dari bahasa Inggris kuno ke bahasa Inggris modern. Drama Inggris ini pertengahan ini tuh dapat dikategorikan menjadi 3 jenis utama sebenarnya. Mystery plays, moralitas, dan juga drama keajaiban. Nah, di sini tuh kita akan ngebahas tentang dua tipe dari English drama itu yang dibagi menjadi religious and secular. Next slide, please. Now we are going to explain about the religious of mystery plays. Yang dibagi lagi menjadi dua. Ada yang namanya cycle plays, ada yang juga namanya miracle plays. Bedanya apa sih kalau yang cycle plays itu? These were the part of the large-scale dramatic cycles that dramatize biblical stories from the creation to the Last Judgment. Each play in the cycle focuses on a specific biblical event or story, and the entire cycle was often performed during the religious festival, like the York, Chester, and the Wakefield cycles are the example of the mystery plays. Now is the miracle plays. Jadi miracle plays is focused on the life of saint and the miraculous deeds. They were often performed as a part of the religious festival dedicated to the specific saint. Jadi di dalam literatur ini kegunaan dalam drama yang ditampilkan itu adalah untuk memberitahu nih kepada warga-warga di sana bahwa ada yang namanya Christianity gitu. Biasanya di dalam play-nya sendiri itu akan diperankan oleh ibaratnya kalau di gereja itu kayak romo-romo, intinya kayak pendeta-pendetanya gitu yang memerankan. Next slide, please. Nah, kita akan ngebahas secular ya sekarang. Jadi, secular or morality plays. Morality plays were analogically and didactic in nature. They presented moral lesson and feature characteristic representing virtues, vice, and other moral qualities. This play played a crucial role in the cultural and religious life of medieval England, providing entertainment and moral instructions to the largely illiterate population. While the scripts has survived to some extent, much of what is known about the performance comes from the historical records and reference in other texts. Okay. Thank you. Jadi, itu merupakan presentasi kita untuk membahas tentang Anglo-Saxon. Sekarang aku bakalan bacain conclusion-nya ya dari kita. So, in conclusion, in the history of the Old English and Middle English period reflects a dynamic evolution of the English language, shaped by the migration of the Germanic tribes, Viking invasion, the spread of the Christianity, and the Norman conquest. The Old English period saw the emergence of a distinct language influenced by various linguistic elements. Throughout the Middle English period, linguistic changes and literary developments and societal shift played a crucial roles in shaping the language. Figures like King Alfred the Great and the Geoffrey Chaucer contributed to the preservation of the transformation of English. The Great Vowel Shift and the introduction of the printing press further propelled to the language toward the standardization. By the end, the English period and English had undergone significant linguistic changes and had become more recognizable to the modern English that we know nowadays. The historical influence of Old English, Norse, French, and Latin collectively contribute to the rich tapestry of the English language development over the countries. So yeah, that is the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for your attention. If you have any question, please do let it know by commenting on this video. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.